Episode 7, Tipping Point. Previously on the cracked plate, Jimmy admitted his fears to Mia, acknowledging how his avoidance had hurt their relationship. Mia, while appreciating his honesty, told him she wasn't ready to come back and needed to see lasting change. Jimmy, determined to prove himself, committed to continuing his growth, but both remained unsure if they could truly rebuild trust or if their fragile progress would falter. Jimmy sat in the workshop circle, the facilitator's voice pulling him from his thoughts. "Today, let's talk about how change is tested," she said, pacing slowly. "Growth doesn't happen in isolation. It's when life challenges you that you find out how much progress you've really made. So think about this. What's your tipping point? What triggers you to revert to old patterns, and how can you handle it differently?" The question struck a nerve. Jimmy's mind flashed back to last night's conversation with Mia. He had texted her to check in, and her response, short and distant, had sparked a familiar frustration. "She's still holding back," he thought bitterly. "What's the point if she won't even meet me halfway?" That bitterness had simmered all night, but now sitting in the circle, Jimmy began to see it differently. The facilitator's voice cut through his thoughts again. Triggers aren't the enemy. They're clues. They show you where your work lies. Instead of reacting, pause and ask yourself, what's really going on here? Jimmy scribbled in his notebook. Frustration equals fear of being rejected. For the first time, he saw how much his fear of rejection fueled his impatience. Mia sat at her sister's dining table, sorting through a stack of bills. The financial strain of living apart from Jimmy was starting to take its toll. She glanced at her phone, tempted to message him, but stopped herself. "I can't keep leaning on him when I don't even know if we'll work out," she thought. Her sister Jenna walked in, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You've been quiet today," Jenna said, sliding one across the table. "I'm just tired," Mia replied, rubbing her temples. "Jimmy's trying, and I can see that, but part of me is still waiting for the other shoe to drop." Jenna leaned against the counter. "You're scared he won't follow through." Mia nodded. "Yeah, but I'm also scared he will, because then I'll have to decide if I'm ready to trust him again." Jenna tilted her head. "And are you?" Mia didn't answer, staring into her tea instead. That evening, Jimmy sat on the couch, staring at the notebook in his lap. He had spent the afternoon reviewing everything from the workshop, determined to keep his frustration in check. His phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "How's the class going?" Jimmy smiled faintly, relief washing over him. She hadn't initiated a conversation in weeks. He typed back, "It's hard, but I'm learning a lot. Want to hear about it sometime?" Her reply came quickly. "Sure." 2 days later, they met at a small coffee shop. Mia listened quietly as Jimmy explained what he'd been learning. "They keep talking about triggers," Jimmy said, his voice steady. "About how they're not just random. They're connected to fears and unmet needs. Like when I get frustrated with you, it's not really about what you said. It's about me feeling like I'm not enough and lashing out because of it." Mia looked at him carefully. "That's, insightful, Jimmy. But do you really think you can stop reacting that way?" Jimmy nodded slowly. "I think I can, but it's not just about stopping. It's about recognizing it and choosing to respond differently." Mia leaned back in her chair, her expression softening. "That's a good answer." For the first time, the tension between them felt less like a barrier and more like a bridge. Later that night, Mia sat on her bed, scrolling through old photos of her and Jimmy. She felt a pang of longing, but also something she hadn't felt in a while. Hope. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was there, a flicker of what might be possible if they could keep moving forward. Across town, Jimmy wrote in his notebook, "Tipping point equals fear of rejection. Response equals patience, understanding, and action." He stared at the words, his jaw tightening with determination. "I'm not giving up," he thought. But the next morning, as hours passed without a text from Mia, doubt began to creep in. Jimmy stared at his phone, the silence louder than any missed connection. As Jimmy and Mia begin to rebuild their connection, the weight of their past threatens to resurface. Will they find a way to break the cycle, or will old patterns pull them apart again? Tune into The Cracked Plate, Episode 8, Breaking Point,